Chapter 7, Potions and Process. Chapter 7, Potions and Process. 6 September 1991. After the events of the previous Monday, Jim was more subdued. Apparently, the other Gryffindors were upset at him losing so many points so quickly, and he'd also received a thorough dressing down from both his mother and McGonagall. He'd written his father to complain, but apparently James was in the doghouse with Lily over his own actions. She'd actually sent him a howler of her own that went off in the middle of the Aura's office. "Let's see how you like it." And so James advised the boy to let things settle for a while. Not that Lily herself had actually reached out to Harry, who didn't know if she disagreed with James' views on his sorting or was simply embarrassed by James firing off a howler at her place of employment. Regardless, Jim and Ron avoided Harry, although he felt certain that his twin had some idiotic Potteresque plan for revenge. Meanwhile, Neville Longbottom apparently had some sort of falling out with the two and made a point of partnering himself with Harry during herbology. Harry was dubious at first until Neville nervously admitted that he was frightened of Snape and desperate to pass potions. He hoped that with an obviously intelligent young Slytherin as his potions partner, he might make it through unscathed.
"I have 3 conditions, Mr. Longbottom,"
said Harry somewhat imperiously.
1. We do not sit anywhere near my brother unless absolutely necessary.
"Oh, okay, Mr. Potter," stammered the nervous boy. Harry took a step forward.
2. From now on you keep your chin up, you look people straight in the eye, and you always speak with confidence, whether you feel it or not, because you are Longbottom of Longbottom, heir presumptive to an ancient and noble house, just as I am Potter of Potter, and if the two of us are going actually earn the legacies our family names have left us, we'd both better get started now.
And with that he put his hand out. "And 3, you call me Harry." Neville blinked several times, then he straightened his back, took a deep breath and shook Harry's hand. "Just as you will call me Neville, I hope." Harry smiled. He wasn't sure, but he could have sworn the boy just grew an inch and a half. Initially, it was Harry who got the better end of the deal, as Neville was a certifiable genius at herbology, already able to talk conversationally about plants from the 4th-year curriculum. Apparently, the Longbottoms had made their fortune in the growing and selling of exotic magical plants of all types, and he'd been up to his knees among them since, before he could walk. It wasn't until Friday that Harry and Neville made it to their first potions class, and there was a crowd outside the locked door. Theo came over to join the two. Malfoy followed with a sneer on his face and Crabbe and Goyle on each side. Harry still wasn't sure which was which.
"Honestly, Potter, you're partnering with Longbottom again. You're squandering what little status you have as a Slytherin by hanging with such lumps."
Harry rolled his eyes.
"You baffle me, Malfoy. I understand why you're hostile to the Potters, though I have no idea what Weasley could have done to make you hate him on sight. And now you're antagonizing the Longbottom heir. Has your father instructed you to make enemies of all the ancient and noble houses?"
Malfoy's face flushed, but then his eyes hardened.
"I don't think it will ever be possible for the Malfoys and Longbottoms to ever be anything but enemies after what his grandmother did."
He spat. Harry crooked an eyebrow and looked back to Neville, who took a deep breath but met Draco's glare without wavering.
"He's referring to an incident from when we were both 5 years old, during which my gran caused a scene and loudly referred to his parents as Death-Eater swine in a crowded restaurant."
Harry pursed his lips and exhaled.
"All right, I can understand why someone might possibly hold a grudge." In her defense, Malfoy's aunt, his uncle's brother, and 2 of his cousins were known Death Eaters, 3 of whom were responsible for the assault on my parents that left them both permanently disabled, and one of whom was the man who betrayed your family to you-know-who, so her assumption was not wholly unwarranted. Also, his father, whose family has supported pureblood policies for generations, avoided conviction for a number of Death Eater-related crimes after claiming to have been under the Imperious Curse. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that within days of his acquittal, St. Mungo's Hospital received a huge donation big enough to pay for the construction of the Abraxas Malfoy Memorial Children's Ward.
Draco and his minion bowed up as if ready to fight. Harry looked around. The Git and the Weasel were further down the hall, but were looking that way. Jim coming over was the last thing Harry was in the mood to deal with.
"All right, listen up, both of you. I'm not going to judge anyone I meet at this school based on what any of their relatives may or may not have done. And I'm not going to surrender the benefits of having a herbology genius as my lab partner because of something that happened when you were both 5. Nor will I blame the Malfoys for something Sirius Black did, seeing as how I looked it up and Sirius Black was one of my cousins too. In fact, I think, Neville, that he was distantly one of yours. Now then, we're all going to be stuck with each other in some capacity for another 7 years. Can we at least try to be civil to one another in spite of what our relatives think? The 3 of us will hopefully all be on the Wisengamot together someday. We may all hate each other by then, but can we resolve now that we'll hate each other for things we actually did to one another, instead of relying on feuds passed down like family heirlooms?
Longbottom and Malfoy stared balefully at one another when the Gits spoke up down the hall. "Hey, Longbottom, don't let these slimy snakes bully you around. Stand up for yourself." Neville raised his chin without breaking Malfoy's eye contact for a few seconds. Then he turned towards Jim.
"I don't know what you're on about, Potter. Malfoy had just come to me with some questions about his herbology assignment. Isn't that right, Malfoy?"
The corner of Malfoy's mouth twitched a bit, but he composed himself quickly.
"Quite so, Longbottom. I'm grateful for your advice. You're a credit to your house,"
he said loudly before turning away and making eye contact with Jim, unlike some others I could name. Jim made a face and then turned back to talk with Ron when the door to the potions class was suddenly jerked open. Professor Snape stared angrily at the assembled Gryffindors and Slytherins, as if annoyed there was no fight for him to break up. "Inside, all of you," he barked. As the students filed in, Harry put his hand on Neville's shoulder.
"Neville,"
he said softly,
"I'm sorry about your parents. I didn't know, and thank you for being a bigger man than Malfoy deserved."
Neville shrugged, but smiled a bit at the compliment.
He was just lucky that Jim's been more of a prat this week than him. He's been strutting around like Godric Gryffindor himself all week long, and most of us are sick of it. Not surprising, if you happen to know. How is Hermione Granger doing?
"You could ask me yourself, you know,"
said an amused Hermione from behind his back.
You startled me, Miss Hermione,"
Harry said with uncharacteristic nervousness. He had not spoken to his first Hogwarts friend since before the sorting, and he wasn't completely sure they were still on a first-name basis given the rivalry between their houses. The smile she gave reassured him that they were.
"Hello, Harry. I'm so sorry I haven't had a chance to come talk to you, but I had promised to sit with Parvati and Lavender in herbology, and this is our only other class together. Incidentally, the books you recommended were all in the library and extremely helpful, even if most Gryffindors aren't as well-mannered as Neville here.
Neville blushed at the compliment.
If you're free and interested, Neville and I have a study session planned in the library for the free period after lunch."
"Yeah, please come, Harry. Hermione's been a real lifesaver." "Sure thing. Oh, forgive me. Hermione Granger, this is Theodore Knott of the House of Knott." "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Granger,"
Theo said tersely.
"Likewise, Mr. Knott."
By the time the 4 students made it into the classroom, the only seats left were near the front, and unfortunately, right next to Jim and Ron, though Ron, Hermione and Neville separated the 2 feuding brothers. As the children settled in, Professor Snape re-entered from the back storeroom with a flourish and proceeded to give a speech alluding to the superiority of potion-making to the foolish wand-waving of other branches of magic. Then he took roll, pausing to remark on James Potter Jr., our new celebrity. Snape had also glared at Harry when reading his name out, but he made no comments. Instead, he suddenly barked,
"Potter.
before clarifying,
James Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?"
Jim rolled his eyes contemptuously.
"I don't know, sir. Obviously not shampoo, though."
The room went deathly quiet. Almost in unison, Harry, Neville and Hermione slowly turned their heads towards Jim Potter in complete amazement. Ron was grinning like a madman, but the rest of the Gryffindors were horrified.
5 points from Gryffindor for your cheek, Potter. Here's an easier one. Where would you find a bezoar?
Harry saw Hermione flinch her arm and suppressed a smile. It was apparently taking all of her willpower not to raise her hand.
Sunken within the greasy depths of your hair, perhaps.
Jim asked sarcastically.
Another 10 points from Gryffindor.
My father said you'd be like this, bullying, snide and cruel, and that you'd probably try to make an example out of me, be asking a bunch of obscure trivia questions first thing. He also said to call you Snivelous.
20 points from Gryffindor. Did he also mention I can do this all day? Here's another one. What's the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?
No idea. What's the difference between?
James Potter Jr., will you stop acting like an ignorant braying ass?
The entire class, including Snape, stared in astonishment at Hermione Granger, who had shot out of her chair and was literally shaking in rage at Jim's antics. After a few seconds of dead silence, Snape quietly said,
5 points to Gryffindor.
Hermione took a deep breath and slowly sat down. Snape turned back to Jim and said more quietly,
I've had quite enough of your idiocy for one day, Mr. Potter. I'll be discussing this matter with your head of house and your mother. If you will have no respect for my